Let me do this one more time, make sure that everything is in place. Let's go. All right. Whoops. You don't know, you don't want to know about CSCP today. We're talking about find it, fix it. The second part of the presentation on cycle counting. So we got to move along. My thought for the year, still the same. We need to be consistent. We need to be agile if we're going to be good leaders and become strategic in the marketplace. So work on your consistency, work on your agility, and focus on growing your skills into the marketplace. I want to thank Knox Johnson. Knox is one of those people that whenever you want to get an honest answer, you go to Knox. And he sent me a note at the end of the last session and said, you skipped over the big part. Come on. Cycle counting helps you find your problems in your inventory. And it does. Yes, it does. And so that's what I wanted to talk about today, is how that works and how we can make that work better. The physical inventory, we covered this a little bit last time. You have to do the financial thing so that you get that report and it's recorded. If you're a publicly held company, that gets reported. And if it's not done appropriately, you have some problems, thanks to our friends Sarbanes and Oxley. But we have to remember that it's only to verify the value, not to make the inventory more accurate. Our inventories used to be so inaccurate that when we did a physical inventory, everybody thought that that was the way to make them more accurate. It isn't. It just verifies the value. So we want to get beyond that. And we want to start thinking about, well, how do we make it more accurate then? Cycle counting, we count the selected list of every day to make sure that we're counting all the parts with the same system, and we're doing it with the frequency that we want. Most companies say their A items, they want to count those every 30 days. And the B items, they want to count those at least once every 90 days, 4 times a year. And the C items, once or maybe twice a year. And that may be reasonable, and it may work well for you. You may decide that you want something more. You want to have super A's where you want to count those every day. If you've got things like gold, one of my operations, I had liquefied gold. It was sort of like gold leaf, but and it had to be available to multiple people at the same time. How do you do that and keep it accurate? And that was an interesting problem that we had to solve. But so you may want to turn that. In that one, we did cycle counting every 2 hours. And we made sure that no one had Ziploc bags. Just wanted to help them stay honest. And so we count, we do that, and then we make sure that the count that we just did is correct, and we check it against what the current system count says, and is it the same? And if not, why not? Why is it different? And the system will say, well, we've done this, we got this transaction in place, we don't have that transaction in place, but the parts have physically moved. You'll find them, and you go, and they're there. Okay, that's good. It's a hit. We were right. We didn't do it exactly the way the system saw it, but when we went back, we found it, and yes, it's there. We're good. We still want to refine our process so that we don't have that happen. But in WIP, that's a pretty frequent thing that we run into. In closed stores, not so much, because we do the transactions in, we do the transactions out. They may not be on the shelf, they may have been picked and put in queue somewhere, but they're in the warehouse. So we have to define, and as we start the process, what we think of as success in hitting the number, the tribulations I've just gone through, we may consider that a hit. But as we get better at this, we reduce the tolerances, and we reduce our tolerance with not getting the right number the first time when we're doing our cycle counts. Once we got to that level and we start to push down, the next question is, how do we test the validity of your cycle count? How do you make sure that it's working? And what we did in one company was we set up 5 tests. The first test was we counted 0 locations. And you go, what? Yeah, the system keeps track of 0 locations. It says this location doesn't have anything in it, according to the system. So you go there, you look, and you say, nope, there's nothing in it. Okay, that's a cycle count. That's a hit. We were right. It's empty. If we find something in it, then we have to go say, well, how come there's something in there? And we follow that through and find out when it got moved in. At the same time, we take that list of empty locations and we go out and we do the counts on those, and they should all be 0. But we also go through and we do a walking tour of all of the locations, and we look for extra locations that are empty that don't have anything in it. Because if it's not on our list and it's empty, is that a miss? Because it was not supposed to be empty. We got a list of the empty items, the empty locations. So is this an error? And we check, we validate, and we verify. So that was the first test. And so we would do that. And then the second test is we would take the A items and we would do a forced cycle count. And when I say forced cycle count, we would amp it up. If we were counting 20 A parts, we would raise that up and count 80 or 100 A parts a day for 2 or 3 days, just to make sure that all of the A's were where we expected them to be, and that the counts were correct and accurate. And then we would take random numbers and we would go out and test random numbers. And the way we did the test counting was we would take an accountant or a quality tech and we would marry them up with a warehouse person and have them go and actually count the stuff themselves, rather than have our regular cycle counters do it. Because if our regular cycle counters were making a mistake, or if they were trying to shift the validity of the count to make themselves look better, we wanted to find that out. And so we tested the whole process by bringing in outside auditors, if you will, to come in and test the validity. And then after we'd gone through the first 3 tests, then we'd go back and we do the A item amped up again, and then we do the empties again. So we do 5 tests. We wouldn't do more than 1 test a month. And so we could do 5 in 5 sequential months, or we could spread it out over the year, just as long as we did all of the 5 tests. And we passed all of the 5 tests. With that, accounting signed off and said, if you can do all of that, then we'll accept the numbers on the accuracy of the inventory. So your daily cycle count is going to be helpful because it's going to show you the parts that have not been transacted correctly. Now, what does that mean? Well, there are various categories, right? You've got wrong part number, you've got wrong quantity, you've got the location. All of these things are errors, and it's because we did something wrong. We transacted it incorrectly. And so we're going to find these as we do the cycle count. What we need to do is we need to capture those and classify them. So we need to record them with the part number, the error type. Was it a count error? Was it a location error? So on and so forth. Inventory categories, whatever types we want, we have to do the categorization. We also want to collect the information on the location and the category of the part, because we want to know when we start looking at this, are there areas in our whole facility that are better than others or worse than others? And if we see a lot of frequency of errors in a particular location, what's causing that? Or if we have particular inventory that's difficult to manage and difficult to count, they're little tiny things, and you got to way count them, but it's difficult because it takes so many of them to offset the tear, and so you've got errors of that sort. We find the errors, we capture the information, and we classify that error information. And then we do Pareto, Pareto, Pareto. Why do I say Pareto, Pareto, Pareto? Well, we have to look to see where are the errors occurring. So we do a Pareto analysis based on location. Or what type of errors, miscounted, over and unders. How many of those? And what about your A's, your B's, and your C's as far as errors are concerned? Which errors are you seeing most frequently? Which errors are you seeing less frequently? And so we go through that whole process. And so we look at it and we break it down into different Pareto graphs so that we can start looking for the things, because we don't want to spend a lot of time working on the C items. We want to spend more time on the A's and B's, getting that part of the system in line. So what are we looking for when we do this? Well, we're looking for weaknesses in the system. Where is our system robust? And we hardly ever see an error in that part of the system. And where is it? Oh my God, really? We need to do something with that. Is it human error? Is it, and I'm not saying, well, you got to run out and point fingers and say, it's Luis's problem, or, it's Adriana's problem. No, is it human error? Are people making mistakes? Well, they do all this scanning. We've got these barcode scanners and they do the scanning. Yeah, and on the back of that, it's got a little tiny keyboard. And if they get a bad read on the tag, what do? They key in the information, and guess what? Human error. If you got fingers as fat as mine, you have problems with your cell phone. If you have problems with your cell phone, you're really going to have problems with the back of some of those scanners. So human error comes in, counts, misidentification, what's happening with them, and why are we seeing them? And then handwriting or manual entry. Anytime we have a manual entry or we have handwritten information, we have to go and look at that very closely, because that's a real strong potential for error going into our system. So you pick your biggest A item, you go out, you look, and it's this part in this location, and we're seeing this problem all the time. And we bring our problem-solving tools. We bring our SciPoc, the process map, the Ishikawas, that's the formal name for cause and effect diagrams, and we bring the 5 whys. And we go out, and what do? We go to the gimlet. We go to see where the problem occurs. And we talk to the people, and we let them explain the process to us. Not we tell them, this is the process, this is how this works. They tell us, this is how the process works. This is how we do our work. Why is it important to do it that way? We drew the maps, we drew up the specifications, we drew up all of the work analysis and all of that stuff and said, this is how it's going to be done. They punch in and they work at this 8-9 hours a day, every day. They know how they do it. We're not out there to tell them how it should be done. We're out there to hear, are they doing it the way we thought it was being done? Or has something shifted? Has something changed in the process? And we need to go and investigate that a little more deeply. But if we don't listen to them, it's going to be difficult for us to understand what the problem is, because we've got the flow charts and we've got the maps and we've got all of that stuff. And that's how this system should work. But it's not working that way if we've got a lot of errors. So we do this. We ask them, let them tell us. and listen to what they say. Map it the way they say. Diagram it the way they say. Get them to concur. Yeah, that's how we do it. Yeah, that's right. Then we can step aside from that conversation and say, okay, this is how it's actually being done. Is this where the error is coming into the system? I'm not sure how many of you have had the opportunity to work with SIPOCs before, so I thought I would just bear with me. SIPOC is an acronym for supplier, input, process, output, and customer. And by customer, we mean what is the requirement of the customer for this operation. So we have, and what we do is we take the process and we go through step by step through the process. What's the first step? What's the second step, third step, and so on until we've completed the process. And we have all of the process steps. What's the input to that process step? And we get a pallet of freight and it comes from this cell and it moves to this point, okay? So the input is we have a pallet of freight that arrives at the entry for the warehouse. And we also get a transaction that comes with it that says we've moved it to the warehouse. And that becomes the input. And so then we say, okay, so what's the output that we're looking for? Well, we want that pallet of freight or product moved and located. So the output is we've got material that needs to be located. And the customer requirement for this is we need to validate the part number and the quantity, and we have to see if there's a system location for it. The supplier is the production department. And so we go through this detail by detail all the way through this whole process. And we put all of that together. Well, why do we do that and what are we looking for? We walk through the process and we've listened to the employees and they've told us process step by process step what has to happen. We've got all of that information. We've got the inputs, we've got the outputs. Are the inputs tied to the output and is the output sequential? In other words, do we have things that repeat or do we have things where the output is this and then you never see it again anywhere, okay? We do this and this happens, but we don't do anything with it. That's it. That's as far as this piece goes. Well, what's this customer requirement here? The customer expecting something? Is there a customer requirement? If there's no customer requirement, why are we doing this? And so we get into this whole process evaluation. At the same time, we're looking to see where is the process broken? Where are we putting stuff in, but it doesn't, the next step is not a logical next step. We've broken the logic. And so we go through this and we do the analysis. And that's what the SIPOC is for, is to help us get this in place. And you can do this with a spreadsheet. It's really easy. You put that process column in, and then you put the inputs, the outputs, the supplier, and the customer. And once you've gotten that all done, and you fill in the cells, you've got a lot of good information there, and you can use it for other things. But you've detailed out your process, and you've started looking for the breaks in the process. You may want a map. These are kind of easy to do, but they're important too because they're where the trade-offs are, where things have to be transacted. The materials coming from the supplier, from the vendor, and so where does it get transacted? It gets transacted here, okay? And then it moves from there to there to there to there. And who does what transaction? And you can put the transactions on this. We do receipts, we do issues, we do return to stock, we do scrap, we do stock to stock transfers. That's pretty much all we do. Those are the common transactions. And so where do those transactions happen? Who's responsible for them in a geographic sense? so that we can see the geography. And when does it change ownership? It goes out of the warehouse into the manufacturing space. Who has the responsibility of receiving it into manufacturing, and who manages it to make sure it gets to the appropriate cell or the appropriate line? Who handles that? Who shows the consumption? Who moves the finished goods? And so all of these questions geographically can get sorted out. And then we can go back and say, does this match the process? Are we doing this at the appropriate step? Are we doing this at the appropriate location? And generally the answers are pretty close. Yeah, that seems to be the way, but it sometimes gets a little messy. Okay. We can also do flow charts where you take the in this case, a manufacturing process, and you go through the whole process and you look at it and you manufacturing writes a scrap ticket. And so all of the transactions that get done, where do they happen and how do they happen in the flow? Do we need to do this? I do. These are the tools that I've learned, and I use them, and they've been pretty successful. This helps us understand the flow, and it helps us. This one gives us a flat line kind of thing about individual process. This one links the processes and says this process feeds this process. Where does it do that? We see that on the map. Here's the process. Here's how this works. If we've got decision points in our process, how does that work? Where does the stuff go? How do we handle that with transactions? Are we aligned? Are we linked? Is that how things are happening? And so this gives us another view and helps us understand where the mistakes are being made, where the errors are being made, how we're encountering those errors, and what we can do to alleviate, to reduce, or to get rid of the errors. And then the Ishikawa, these were named for Dr. Ishikawa, a Japanese engineer who created this form. And
hi, Tanisha, how are you? This is Oscar from Johnson Controls. Good. I'm glad you're back. I don't know if you already saw my email about the SPR 39-4000.
Yeah. Okay. Now he can have his conversation. We can continue. Okay. So Dr. Ishikawa used to use the fishbone charts for everything. And in his books, he talks about, well, you start your chart here and you do this. It's kind of interesting the way he uses them. But for what we're doing, you've got an inventory error. How did it happen? Was it the material itself? Was it the method that you were using? Was it human resources? Was it a machine that we were weight counting and the weight counter didn't work right, or we were manually, or we were electronically counting, or however we were doing it, did everything work the way it was supposed to? And so when we look at the errors, we can go back with this and go back and go back and go back to get to a root cause. What is the cause of this particular problem? Because once we fix it, you'll fix a symptom forever. You'll constantly be fixing the symptom. But if you fix a root cause, you only have to fix it once and do a good job of fixing it, and a whole lot of problems go away. So when you start and you work with your cycle counting process, you're looking for root cause and doing root cause analysis so that you can get to the root, get it fixed, and not have to go fix it again and again and again. From W. Edwards Deming, one of my heroes, fix the process, not the symptom. And if you can't describe what you are doing as a process, you don't know what you're doing. W. Edwards Deming created statistical process control and was brilliant. But he wasn't necessarily the most pleasant person that you'd ever want to meet. He wasn't rude and crass like Ellie Goldratt was, but he was not. He didn't suffer fools at all. If you ask good questions, he would answer. But if he thought you were being weird or not fruitful, he would let you know that. So that's basically my story. With those tools, you should be able to fix it. You should be able to get your inventory accuracies up. I've used this process and I've taken companies from like 30% accuracy to 99.5% accurate. There's always a little room for error here and there. And as I said, we've had several companies where we've actually managed to get away from doing physical inventories because we were able to convince the management team and the accounting teams that this was the best way to do it. And it saves the company a lot of money because you don't have to take days off. And physical inventories are waste from my perspective. So new ideas, we had some new ideas, and some of these, a couple of these I'm going to be talking about next time. But there are some interesting questions here. How do you show the results of a cycle count? My favorite one of this, I had a warehouseman when I was with Cummins Diesel Recon, Carlos Hernandez, probably one of the best warehouse supervisors I've ever worked with. And I used to love it because I'd be taking groups on tour and we'd turn the corner and we'd have a sign right next to the window. And it's important. Graph the results and put the graph right next to the window. You know, because the inventory accuracy in this location is, and there's your graph telling them what that inventory accuracy is. And we turn the corner and you'd see the bars and they'd be all over the place, you know, up and down, up and down, and up and down. I'd say, isn't that great? That's our inventory accuracy. And it's wonderful. Look at that. They're all looking at it and the bars are all over the place. And they're going, this guy's been smoking the local product because this is not wonderful. And then I'd smile and I'd say, come over and look at the bottom line on the graph. Look at the x-axis. Where is it on the y-axis? Because the expectation is you're looking at 0 on the y-axis where the x-axis hits. But what Carlos did was he made that line 99%. So all you were seeing when you looked at the graph was the variation between 99 and 100%. And so when you looked at it that way, it made the bars look bigger. If you went with 0 to 100%, it was a flat line. Well, a flat line doesn't tell you anything. Change the scale. Look at it closer. Tighten down on these things. So how do you show the results of your cycle counting? Graph it. Make it graphic and make it available to everyone. If you're doing it on the shop floor, make it available. Put it up there with the daily results, wherever they're posting their information for their lean boards and that kind of stuff. Put it there. Get the information out. Make everyone responsible for good inventory. Okay, I'll cover some of these next time. I wanted to talk just briefly about the foundations of supply chain management. This is a new course that Apex has come out with. We've been looking at it. We've been doing some research with it. And we believe that this is a really good course. It's available and it works with your workforce. The foundations is good knowledge and it can work at that level. For your supply chains and enabling functions, we believe in certification, of course, CPIM and CLTD and CSCP, and you get your supply chain procurement certificates and warehousing certificates, and then the foundations of supply chain is part of the continuing education process where you can do micro learning so that you can learn more about what's going on. And then at the top level, you've got the CSCP and SCORE-P, specialty training and S&OP supply chain, but you also have the transformational learning that comes from the foundations as well. So we think that this is good material, and we're going to be rolling it out. We'll probably have some sort of deal coming out in the next 30 days or so. So we're going to be looking at this and bringing it forward. Think about this, and we may actually do some sample classes where we bring in a group of people and teach a sample class. There are 5 modules. The introduction to supply chain principles, the foundations of distribution, manufacturing, managing operations, inventory operations planning, and supply chain management. So we're looking at that. We're going to work our way through it, and we'll come up with an offer for everyone. So this is my advertisement for the month. Our class schedule is out there. Pretty soon you'll see the foundation courses showing up on our calendar as well. So have a great month, a great week. Some of the holidays are behind us, and warm weather is just starting. So get your tanning oil out, because I know you're not busy working or anything. So go forward and have a good time. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.